Page 20, 20 lines from the top of the page. We are about to complete this parak, this first parak, first chapter of Tractate Sukkah. It's wonderful and encouraging to know that it's match this special Shabbat, this special weekend. This weekend we're about to complete the book of Shmot, book of Exodus, Parashat Pekudei. We're going to read the ending of Chazak, Venit Chazek. Be strong and get strengthened. Good morning. So we not only going to complete this parak today, but this Shabbat we're going to complete and bless the new month, the second month of Adar. So it's all wrapped up with the month that everything turn around for good, and may it will turn around for all of us and our viewers for good, and this month turn to happiness and gladness to all. 20 lines from the top of the page. 20. Tanu Rabbanan, מחצלת של שיפה ושל גמי גדולה מסככים בה, קטנה אין מסככים בה. We are speaking here about a mat, and we explained that there are different sides of the machzalot, of those mats. If you made out of papyrus or a blushers, which means that it made in a sense of a large one, that wasn't for the purpose of line, we assume that therefore the designation of that mat is to do a schach, to do a roofing of the sukkah, and therefore if it's large you can use it for the sukkah, but if it's a small one you don't put it for the sukkah for obvious reason. As we said yesterday, it's most probably made for the other purposes, such as to sleep on those mats, like they do in some Middle Eastern countries. Now, shel kanim v'shel cheilat, however, if it's made out of ordinary reeds, or reeds specifically for platings, so Rashi explained that it's a herb that grows in a certain wet areas, and it carries some strength inside that herb. And for sure it's question how they exactly made those mats, because if you go to, for example, to Cairo, you see in the market a different style of mats. They use it a lot in those countries. If you go to a country like Japan, since they use a lot of mats, you see again a very different style of mats. So the question is how and what materials they use. So he said, Gdola mesakhin ba, aruga en mesakhin ba. If it's a large, so one may use it for the sukkah because it made by woven, like you woven the tapestry, you put it together. So therefore you can use it. It's inconvenience for sleeping, so we assume again that the designation of that one was for schach. But if it's aruga, if it's woven with a very small fine weave, so you do not use it for the sukkah. Again, what's the reason? As the Tosfot tells us, that we apply here to what? To a small mat. We assume that people make it for what purpose? For lying there. And therefore the designation is not to do it as a schach. Rabbi Yishmael ברבי יוסי אומר, משום אביו, אחת זו ואחת זו מסככים בה. וכן היה רבי דוסה אומר כדבריו. He says, come on, what's the difference? Regardless if it's a woven or if not, if people designate for one purpose or another, regardless if it's small or aruga maaseh avot, which means that it's made in different style. He disagreed with the sages. He said, fine, you can use it regardless. So Tosfot explained to us, and he said that if it's made out of those reeds and is small one, so it's a dispute. And he said, again, the question is if it's befitting for what? If it's befitting to sleep on those, it's small one. The Pnei Yoshua, the Maharsha, etc., etc. He said that if it's a woven, it's imagine a person sit and in those days they do it all by hands, not even machines. And they make those materials, and therefore it's the question is what they're doing it just for people to sleep on that. He says Pnei Yoshua tried to say that the assumption is that they use it for other purposes. So therefore, since it's not designated for sleeping, you can use it for the schach. Simple story. Nanatam. We learn in the tractate Eduyot. In order for us to understand this sugya, I would like to use my book Biura Klomar B'Rashi Shas, because it's a very interesting Rashi coming up that use the word Klomar. And here is the introduction. We have something that is called Avi Avot HaTumah. Avi Avot HaTumah, it's someone that carries the highest level of ritual impurity, which is what? A corpse. A dead body of a corpse. The moment a person touch it, he become a Avatuma, which is, in our simple language, if you remember the other day, I talked about grandpa, father, and the grandson. The grandpa, which is the highest level of ritual, rendering ritual impurity, susceptible for ritual impurity, is the corpse itself. A person that touched the corpse, he became father, Avatuma, and therefore for 7 days period, he is ritually impure. Now, the one who touched the person who touched the corpse, this is the grandson, right? This is the third stage, and it's called Rishon Letuma. The attachment caused the person to be impure until the sun set. Now, the idea of situation like a person sit on something that is ritually impure. For example, in those days you're riding a donkey, you're riding a horse, and the one who sit on, you tell me how it's called, the one that you sit on the horse, what is called that seat?
Saddle.
Saddle, thank you. If the saddle, you sit, so that's called in Hebrew, and remember that word because we're going to use several times, so you remember that, it's called midras. That's the name of that ritual impurity. So if you sit on that saddle, for example, or you sit on something that it carry ritual impurity, that attach to something that is ritually impure, so you don't become the first like the father, like the grandson, you become like a father. So it's like the same equivalent to a person who's zav, who have a discharge. Another category we need to understand, it's called kli etz, which is a wooden vessel. Wooden vessel can be susceptible to any ritual impurity, excluding midras. Only if that, for example, a saddle or whatever it is, was made purposely for lying. So here is the general principle. Remember this rule. Anything that is susceptible to receive the midras, the ritual impurity of midras, it's also have the capability to receive ritual impurity to any other ritual impurities. So again, midras by category is, to make it simple, if a person sit on the saddle and that saddle touched something that is totally ritually impure, that person became the father, not the grandson. Clear? Mm-hmm. Now we go to our sugya. Tnan hatam. We learn in the tractate Adayot, chapter 3, Mishnah 4. Kol ha-chotzalot metam'in tum'at met. So we learn in Hodayot that all the chotzalot, we don't know yet what is chotzalot means. In general, we will learn it later. What's the difference between met, machzelet, and chotzalot? It's resonate the same sound, but it's a little different. So we said they can become ritually impure, which ritual impurity imparted by a corpse. So Rashi said here klomar, and he explains that those chotzalot, not made for shchiva, for lying, and therefore they not have the capability to have this tumat midras, and the reason that they use the term, Rashi said, using the word klomar, why using the term met, a corpse, is just as an example. It's not only corpse, can be a creeping animal, can be a nevela, a dead animal, and these come to teach us that that's not included midras, ritual impurity, that it's not susceptible to that ritual impurity because it's not designated for sleeping. So Chachamim Omrim, that's the idea of Rabbi Dosa. Rabbi Soda said that it's carry ritual impurity. The Chachamim Omrim, the sages said, yes, since they designated for sleeping, therefore they are avatuma, and therefore the father, and they are capable to to receive the midras, the treating ritual impurity. So now the Gemara asking midras in met lo. So you tell me what, that if it's a midras is treating, it's yes. So impurity imparted by what? By a corpse. But impurity imparted by the corpse, not. Ve'anantnan. We learn in another Mishnah, Tractate Nida, page 49. Kol hamitameh midras, metameh tumat met. Anything that is capable to receive this ritual impurity of midras, for example, a zav, person who have a discharge, so he become a avatuma, a father. If, for example, if a person has discharge, he attached to something else, that entity can be a father, avatuma. So therefore that's contradicted. So now the Gemara elaborated on that and said, Eima af midras, which means that those met, those chotzalot, yet we don't know exactly what is chotzalot, but let's say those chotzalot, it's vessels that designate for the purpose of lying. And the Gemara said, my chotzalot. Now let's understand the term chotzalot. So you have here, Amar Rav Avdimi bar Amduri, marzuvlei. We don't know what is marzuvlei. My marzuvlei. Amar Rav Avdimi Amar Rabbi Abba, mazbelei. Mazbelei. What is a mazbelei? So the idea is, there are several sources. The first, there is Gemarrah in Shabbat, page 59, that speaks about susceptible of ritual impurity. But here we speak about a shepherd. Shepherd that carries a, how do you say it, a knapsack?
Yeah, sack. A sack.
A sack. Thank you. So the Ritva or Rashi said that the shepherds, they're out in the field, they have this sack, and sometimes they sitting and lying while they let the animal gaze, right? Graze. Thank you. So here the sages said, since they put this sack under their head, it's like some type of pillow, then they are capable of tumat midras. So that's one view. Rabbi Dosa disagreed. And he said, since their purpose was not to put the head on that sack, their purpose was to be a sack, which means the moment that this shepherd was going to lie in that sack, the employer can come up and said, come, stand up, do your job. So therefore, they are not capable, the Aruch explains, for tumat midras, to midras ritual impurity. It's important to know that the famous Chazon Ish, Rabbi Karelitz, explained to us that, number one, they use it in a rare occasion. In other words, it's not for day-by-day using. It's not, number two, it's not ein darkam, that's not the manner of using it. So therefore, it's not receiving midras impurity. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer, machzalot mamash. He said, guess what? Here we're speaking about what? A real one, the reeling, actual mats. So now we elaborate on that. Asda Rish Lakish letamei. Rish Lakish come up with this notion. The Amar Rish Lakish. Listen to this. Areini kaparat Rebbi Chia uvanav. So here is the story. A person that lost his loved one, if it's come to a parents, the Gemara tells us in Tractate Kiddushin, page 31, that the person needs to say, I am the atonement of my late, can be a father, mother, etc., sins, which means that it's an expression not only of love and forgiveness, but it's an expression that in a way a person accepts upon himself as act of honoring parents their mistakes. Hareini kaparat mishkavo. The halachic notion of that applies mainly to two entities. One, it's son to his parents or daughter. Second one applies to student, because they said, the Gemara said in several places, that by meaning of comparison, in some ways the teacher, in some manners, teacher exceeded parents. Why? Because the parents bring the person to this world, the teacher bring the person teaching Torah to the next world. So therefore, the tradition is to say this line during the 12 months mourning period to upon a teacher as well. That I am the atonement of my teacher's sins. Now here it exceeded more than 12 months, and he did it, Reish Lakish said it, because of huge love. Remember the background of Reish Lakish, right? Huge love of Rabbi Chia as a teacher and his sons. Now, he explained to us why he had such a deep feeling toward him. שבתחילה נשתכחה תורה מישראל. When the Jewish people were forced out of the land during the exile of the first temple, it was such a huge crisis that the whole school of learning disappeared. Those who learn Jewish history just by comparison, when the Nazi Yimach Shemam came to being to power, the first thing they did to Jewish community, they went to the city of Lublin and they burned 55,000 manuscripts of their library. That was the first stage, which means that they understand, and then they get rid of the rabbis. They understand that the center of learning, that's the cause of survival of the Jewish people. So therefore, during the first temple, while the evil Babylonian king burned the temple and forced the Jews out, the whole school of learning that was so established about, God forbid, to disappear. So therefore, Allah Ezra mi Bavel ve'izda. Ezra, which is a book in a canon, in the 24 books of canon, it's expression of Ezra. So the time that Koresh, the king of Persia, allowed the Jewish people to return to the land after 70 years of exile, so most of the rabbis who established the school of learning in Babylon, or in Babylon, they're teaching there. Ezra went with some minority of people back to Eretz Israel in order to do what? To build the second Beit HaMikdash. So when Ezra, the Gemara said in Kiddushin 69, when he returned from Bavel to Eretz Israel, was the issue of learning. He needs to educate people, and he put an arduous effort. Nehemiah was more administrator, who helping with administration and building. But Ezra focused as a scribe of teaching the people. So he was the one who caused the survival of Torah. He wanted to make sure that Torah will not disappear from the nation of Israel, as the Gemara said in Zvachim. And therefore, he reinstituted the Torah. Now, whom Ezra learned? Ezra learned it from Shma'anya and Avtalion. Then what happened? Unfortunately, Chazra v'nishtakcha. During the crisis of the second temple, the Torah again, our nation went through a period of the disappearance of Torah learning. Allah Hillel Habavli v'yesada. So Hillel, the Babylon, the great Hillel, right? We have many Hillel houses now to commemorate his great kindness. One of the things the Gemara in Ketubot said, that Hillel went to all these weird, rare places, taught people very basic Hebrew, basic Chumash, basic halachot, in order to make sure that he teach them and have the perpetuation of Torah. And the Gemara tells us in Ktubot that even you teach a person something, one halacha that he now see the whole understanding of Torah in different ways, it's in a way it's like you teach him or her the whole Torah. So he basically, Hillel, came back and reinstituted all those halachot that in some ways people forget. Then, unfortunately again, chazra v'nishtakcha, people are scattered again for all this changing of leadership, etc., etc. And as a result, guess what? People become disconnected to learning of the Torah. So as a result, and that's the key point, ala Rabbi Chia uvanav v'isadua. So Rabbi Chia came with his sons, as Gemarrah in Chulin 66 said, and also Zvachim, and he returned and teach the Torah in all these rare, faraway places, small villages, small cities, all kind of places that you don't see much Torah. He puff in all this learning and bring back the learning of Torah. So now, why we tell us all of that? Now you see why he exceeded more than 12 months of saying, may I, meaning Reish Lakish, being the atonements for the sin of Rabbi Chia and his sons. Because even they are no longer among the living, and even they exceeded more than 12 months, but he expresses a deep love toward them because they basically revivified the Jewish learning. So what exactly they said? וכן אמר רבי חייא ובניו, לא נחלקו רבי דוסה וחכמים על מחצלות של אושה. Rabbi Dosa and the sages did not disagree concerning the soft mat of the city called Usha. 20b, shehen tmeot, which means that this one, the mat, is become ritually impure even with impurity imparted by midras, by treating, the same as all the other mats that used for the purpose of lying on them. So the Rosh explains to us that the whole idea of using this mat, it's not depend of each individual, but it's depend upon the minhag, the tradition of the community. Some places they designated those mats for the purpose of sleeping, like we mentioned the other day in Egypt, they use those mats for sleeping. So even one individual made it for the purpose of the schach, he is not a good example because we go the majority of the community how they do things. Minhag HaMakom, as the Mishnah tells us at the first Mishnah in chapter 4, Tractate Psachim. Now, ושל טבריה, שהן טהורות, is also the city of Tiberias, that they are basically ritually pure from the midras ritual impurity, and they are not susceptible, but only the other type of attachment to ritual impurity, because they are very strong, those mat, and not befitting for lying. Al manechelku, what is the real disputation? Al sh'ar mekomod. So we are talking now about other places that it's the minority that they use for the purpose of lying. Mar savar Rabbi Dosa hold kivan deleika deativ alayu kitver yadamyan. Because most of the people do not use it permanently for sitting or sleeping, therefore we compare them to the mats using in Tiberias, and therefore they are not susceptible to the midras ritual impurity. Okay? Umar Savar, the sages disagree, and they said, Kevan de mikre ve'atvei alayu, even you do not designated them for the purpose of sitting, but since sometimes people use them for the purpose of sitting, like as you mentioned in Japan, right? How they eat in most of those places in Japan, right? I've been in Osaka, after the service, and I saw most of the places, even in a hotel that we stay, people sit almost on the floor. They take a little mat and they sit on that. Kede usha damya, the same as usha, that it's designated for what? For the purpose of lying, and therefore they are susceptible to midras, ritual impurity. So, and therefore, even in those points, Reish Lakish hold that the disputation between Rabbi Dosa and Chachamim, sages, speak about real quote-unquote meds, which means are they susceptible to receive midras ritual impurity or no? So, Amar, so the Mishnah, Be'eduyot, that we mentioned on page 28, said as follows: Kol hachotzalot metam'in tum'at met. So here is the question: what does that mean, chotzalot? Chotzalot, is that met? Is that machzelet or not? Because we separate. We understand that chotzalot is extremely small met. Machzelaot, it's something that is large, is befitting for lying, and therefore it's receiving ritual impurity, and you do not use it for the roofing of the sukkah. So they said, Kol hachotzalot metam'im tmemet. They are susceptible to corpse ritual impurity, divrei Rabbi Dosa. V'hatanya v'chen היה Rabbi Dosa omer kidvarav. Rabbi Dosa used to say the same as Rabbi Yossi, that you use for those type of mats, like the reeds, etc., regardless to the side, because he holds that it's not considering quote-unquote a vessel that's susceptible to ritual impurity. So therefore, so according to Reish Lakish, chotzalot and machzalot is no difference. So that contradicted to what Rabbi Dosa said himself in the Mishnah, that chotzalot are susceptible to receive corpse ritual impurity. So the Gemara said, it lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Ha de it leg dafna, ha de late leg dafna. The first one, around the mat, has this corner that high, so whatever you put there, it's not going to fall out. Why? Because it's made look like a large vessel, and the vessel purpose, as the rabbis tells us, is for produce, for fruits, etc. So it's called kli kibul. You use them to carry like a large, how do you call that? Large that you carry fruits. Large vessel. What?
A basket.
Basket, thank you. Large basket. So how you make, let's analyze. If you have a basket made out of those reeds, or basket that made like a large mat, so you have the basket, the size of the basket, it's made like a vessel. People use it for what? For the purpose of carries produce. The late dafna, so it's different story. So if is designated to receive a produce, so therefore you treat it differently. So it's a rabbinic idea that they are susceptible for ritual impurity. So Radvaz said in the responsa, he said that even they have gdafna, even they have those side that looks like a vessel, if they designated that one solely for roofing of the sukkah, it's not under the category of a vessel, and therefore you can use it as schach, as a roof. The levush disagree with it. Anyway, meitive. Now we have another question of Reish Lakish. Chotzalot shel sha'am. So chotzalot made of papyrus, the veshel gemi, or blasters, veshel sak, and sackcloth, so that's made out of goat hair, veshel sfira, a horse hair, or either from his tail or from his neck, metamet to matmet. So it means that he is susceptible to corpse ritual impurity as well as other ritual impurity, excluding midras ritual impurity, because they under the category of a vessel, and it's not designated for neither sleeping nor a line. דברי רבי דוסה. והחכמים אומרים אף מדרס. And the sages said no, it's including the ritual impurity imparted by treating. בישלמה למאן דאמר מר זובלי. If you go by the one who said that the chotzalot applies to those sack or sackcloth or knapsack that they use by those shepherds, so we understand, because Rav Dosa doesn't call them something that designated for the purpose of lying, but anyway they have other purposes for using other shel sham v'shel gemi, so that the woven it's not so tight. Chazu lechitna defirei. So you can use them for large produce, large fruits that they don't come out by those holes of that sack. Shel sak v'shel sfira chazu legulkei betzani. They use for small produce. Ela leman damar bad, according to Reish Lakish, that said what machzalot mamash, which means that it's flat and they don't have any capability to carry his product like a regular basket. So, bishlama shel sak v'shel sfira, if you tell me that that's applied to those that they receive ritual impurity, even Rav Dosa don't call them something that befitting for lying. Chazu lefarse v'nafvata, you can use it for curtain, for example. Ela shel sham v'shel gemi, but the others that use for papyrus or blasters, so he said lemai chazu, so that's not for the purpose of lying. So what do you use it? So you may say that they received the ritual impurity of corpse and others, so you don't have other purposes for that. So you may say that maybe they can be good for roofing, and you said that it's not susceptible to ritual impurity. Remember, we said it many times, that one of the two conditions for schach of the roofing of the sukkah is something that's not rendering a ritual impurity. So they said chazu lenaziata. They are feet used for covers for vats of ale. So it means, for example, you have this barrel of wine, large barrel, and you cover it with that one. Ika de amri. There are those who said, Tosfot disagree, but anyway, there are those who said, Bishlama leman damar machzalot mamash. If you go by those who say that it's a real mat, that's basically the idea of Reish Lakish, because according to him, even what Rav Dosa not consider them as a designate for sleeping, still carries the designation of a vessel, a basket, for use for some purposes. Shel sham v'shel gemi chazun elanyata. You can use it for what? For covering of barrel of wine, large barrel of wine. However, shel sak v'shel sfira chazu lefarse v'naviata. And also, it's also for the others, the thin one, they use as a curtain. Ela leman de'amar, but according to Rav Abdimi Baram Dori, that said that this mat using for what? Marzovlei, for what? For the sack of the shepherds. Bishlamash l'sak v'shel sfira chazu legulkei v'tzine. They use it because they're woven so tight, so they don't have a space. They can use it for a small produce. Ela shel sham v'shel gemi lemai chazu. But those, they have a large space between them, so they're not befitting for small, tiny produce. So what the purpose they can use, excluding sleeping? So they respond, Chazu lechinta defirei. They can use as a basket for large produce. Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Amar Rabbi Hanania. Rabbi Hanania is brother-in-law of Rabbi Yoshua, mentioned in several places in the Shas. Ksheyaradti lagola, Rabbi Hanania went to the exile to Babylon to set up the years. That's the Gemara in Brachot 63. So at that time, Matzati zaken echad, I found an elderly wise man, ve'amar li, and he told me, mesakhin bevudya, we can use for those mats. So the Chazon Ish explains here 2 points. Number one, it's not designated for the purpose of sleeping. It's like Tiberius. It's not susceptible for ritual impurity. Another point, it's large, and it's not arugot, it's not woven, and therefore it's not candidate for susceptible of ritual impurity, and you can use them for the schach, for the roofing of the sukkah. Why? Because the assumption is, again, that it's designated for that purpose, and it's not considering a basket or a vessel. וכשבאתי אצל רבי יהושע אחי אבא, so here Rabbi Yoshua, it's applied for Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, as Gemarrah in Nazir, Tractate Nazir, page 56b, which Rashi and Tosfot explained that that's Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, Achi Abba, the uncle, Hoda lidvarav, he agreed to what these wise elderly persons said. Amar Rav Chizda circumscribed, he limited that rule, and he said, Vehu, this rule apply to specific mat, the let they gdanfa, that mat doesn't have, which we call in a basket, how do you call that part in a basket that you carry the side of the basket?
Rim. A rim.
A rim, thank you.
Rim.
Doesn't have the rim around. So but those that have a rim, thank you, so it's considering kli kibul, as the Tosfot said, because it's susceptible to receiving, and therefore they are unfitting for schach. What's the use? So Rashi explaining Ketubot, page 50, and others, they say that they used to put it under the tree of palm tree. If you go to Dead Sea in Israel, you see on the way those places that they have a large palm trees, and they put those baskets with the rim to collect the falling dates, the dates that fall from the tree. That's the designation of those mats. So he said, this applies to what mat that doesn't have the rim, right? Otherwise, it's unfitting for schach. Amar Ula, Hane Budiata, Ula said that these mats of the residents of Budiata, the Bnei Mechoza, these mats that part of the resident of Mechoza, Il Malay Kirshalem, if not for their walls, which means upturn edge, Mesakhin Bahem. If it wasn't the wall, if it wasn't a large rim around them, they are befitting for schach, for the roofing of the sukkah. Another source of support for that point, Tanya Nameache, we learn also in the Braita, Mesakhin Bevudia. We can use this Bevudia, we use the roof of sukkah with the mat, V'im yesh lahem kir, ein mesakhin bahem. So if they have this rim, you cannot use it. So the Rif and the Rosh said, however, if you take from those baskets the rim, if you cut the rim around the basket, so you can use it now for the schach of the sukkah. Hadran Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 629. Machzelet, small mats made of reeds, straw, or blushes may not be used to have the schach, roof of a sukkah, since they are typically used for the purpose of lying upon them. So the moment you're lying upon them, it's no longer for the purpose of roofing, to put it as a ceiling of the sukkah. However, if a mat of this sort was designated for use of roofing, then it is fit roofing. According to Rema, again it's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 629, based on the Rosh, that is the halacha in a place where most people in that place use a mat of that kind of roofing. But if it's a large, one may use this as schach for the sukkah, as roofing is its typical use. However, if it was designated for the purpose of lying upon it, It's not, it is unfit roofing, which means that the Rema understands these two as referring to a place where it's typically used for the purpose lying upon it. So that's basically follow the Rav Papa, who goes by the unattributed of the Mishnah. Now, in general, we learn in this perek the halachot of Sukkah, constructions, the dimensions, the materials, the structure, and in the manner how it's constructed. So here we go to the last halacha of today, which again the same sword, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 629. Any mat that has an upturned edge, which like a rim, right, is rendered acceptable and may not be used in the schach and roofing of the sukkah, even if the edge is subsequently turned down. That's basically the way that we understand the Gemarrah. And as we said many times, if you come to a practical halachic question, you always have to ask a prominent posek to know how to do in this type of situations. Hadran Alach, Perek Rishon, Hadran Alach Sukkah.